In this video, we're going to be working on the third structure, the one that is between column lines 7 and 9. We have here a slab on grade, and the structure that we're going to be adding to the top of this slab is going to be made out of light gauge metal framing. So many of the concepts are the same as with the wood frame construction, but there are some really important and key differences in the two types of construction. So we'll be talking about that as we begin to build this structure. Okay, to start off with, we'll be going to level 1 to begin adding some walls. We'll add the walls on all 4 sides here. And what I'm going to do is go to architecture, to the wall, pull down here, and I'm going to look for a possible wall to use as a basis for this one. So just scrolling up and looking what I have: brick, CMU, EFIS, siding on wood framing. We're going to be making lots of changes to this. I'm just going to go ahead and select this basic one here for siding on wood framing. And then I'm going to click on Edit Type. And I'm going to duplicate it. And this one will be called siding on metal studs or metal framing. That's better, on metal framing. And I'm going to click on OK. Then I'm going to click on the Edit button here, and I'll begin adding some components to this wall assembly. Now, going to your textbook, this is the chapter that's on wood light frame construction. So as you know, we're doing this one out of light gauge metal, but there's some concepts here that still apply. So I've got 2 wall assemblies here. On the left side, we have 2x6 studs with bad insulation. And on the right side, we have 2x4 studs with continuous insulation and bats. So the continuous insulation is on the exterior side of the wall. We have the 2x4s and then bats within them. We're going to use a similar concept in the detailing of this light gauge metal framed wall. We'll have continuous insulation on the exterior, and we'll have bats. We won't include bats actually in this particular wall. We'll include them in the ceiling assembly. We'll leave these open, and we're just going to rely on this continuous insulation to provide for us the insulation that we need. Again, these, instead of being wood framed, these walls, they will be framed out of metal. Additionally, we're going to be applying some concepts of drained cladding or rain screen cladding, which basically means that there's a air gap behind the siding that permits moisture basically to drop to the bottom of the wall assembly. So we'll have this insulation. This detail shows something else, but we'll have these layers of insulation, of rigid insulation that run continuously. And then we'll use some furring strips, and then the siding will be attached to it. So back in our wall assembly, here we have the siding or clapboard. 3/4 of an inch is fine. Air infiltration barrier, the plywood sheathing, and then we get into the core. So we're going to need to add some layers here. I'm going to click on Insert. And the first layer I'm going to add, put it on top of the finish layer. I'm going to move it down. This one is going to be, we'll call it a thermal air layer. And we will then look up, we just need some material to serve in this space. I'm going to call it dimension lumber, even though it's just 3/4 inch furring. And I'll give it a thickness also of 3/4 of an inch. So that's going to be the thickness of that air gap in back. And then I'll go ahead and insert another layer. And that one is going to be below the furring, this is going to be a layer of, I'm going to click on the materials here. Let's go back and I'll show you that. Click on the little dots, 3 dots, the ellipsis, rigid insulation. And say, okay. Now for the thickness of this, and we'll make this a thermal air layer as well. We're going to go with 3 inches of rigid insulation. Now, the rigid insulation, we're looking to get at the very minimum an R value of 15 from our wall. Of course, you can always add some bats when we get down here to the structure portion of the wall, but we'll have 3 inches of rigid insulation on the exterior. And below that, we'll have the membrane layer and the substrate. So you don't need to make any changes to that. Okay, so this wall was based on a wood framed wall. We are going to look up metal stud layer. And we'll click on OK. Now it's going to default to, well, it was already set to a dimension layer, a dimension 4-dimension lumber, 5.5 inches. We're actually going to make our wall out of the equivalent of 2x4s. And for metal studs, the actual dimension would be 3.625 or 3 5/8. Again, this is the equivalent of a 2x4 wall if it were framed in wood. Okay, now going down here, we have a vapor retarder, and we'll leave that as is, and a layer of gypsum wallboard that is 5/8 inch, and we'll keep it like that. And I'm going to click on OK. And apply and OK. All right, now I'm ready to place my wall. I'm going to go to the architecture tab, and I'm going to leave it unconnected. It says 20 feet here. Maybe I'll drop this to 10 feet just for the time being. We'll be changing that shortly. Core face exterior. I'm going to align this wall with the face of my edge of slab here. So we're going to change this. Finished face exterior is what I want that to be. And now I'll go ahead, and it's the right wall, exterior siding on metal framing. I'm going to go around here and add that wall type. Zoom in a little closer. If you haven't already, you can click on the thin line so that you can see the detail. So we'll kind of come in a little closer. I have my clapboard layer, my furring layer. I've got this 3 inches of furring or of rigid insulation. I've got a sheathing layer. I've got my metal studs, and then I've got my gypsum wallboard on the interior side. So it's a pretty thick wall. But it does handle that issue of the thermal bridge presented by the metal framing. So I'm basically putting all of my insulation on the outside of the metal framing, so that's not an issue. And again, one could always add more bats in between, and it will improve the R value of the wall assembly as a whole. So let's go ahead and take a look at the section number 1. You can see these are only coming up 10 feet. And take a look at the detail close to the edge of the slab. Now, when I placed the walls, I aligned them with the face of the concrete slab here. And as I was describing with this assembly, this is an airspace in here that wants to drain out. Now, I can put some flashing at the bottom and turn it out and have it direct the water to the outside, but it might be a better detail to just let this air gap be at the bottom be on the left side here of the slab so that it doesn't have to like basically make a turn. So what I'm going to do here first is measure the distance here. So I've got 2 layers of 3/4, so that should be 1.5 inches. I'm going to take that wall and I'm going to move it from here to here. Right, so now there'll be a membrane that's on top of the insulation, but the water, if it's draining out, will go directly out. Okay, and I need to go around all 4 sides of my structure to make that change, 1.5 inches. Okay, and again, you're looking for an alignment of the insulation. And I'll go to section 2. Okay, it looks like I'm gonna have to move section 2. Let's go to level 1 and shift that section marker over to the one I'm working on. Go back to section 2. And all right, I can see some of the stuff in the structure beyond. That's okay. I'm going to move this one over 1.5 inches. And this one I will also move over 1.5. Okay. Let's take a look at this in 3D. Okay, so there we have the beginnings of our wall.